Very proud to be a pink lady and delighted to take part in the Gashard Fela event. I'm going to read two stories. One of them is something that happened to my friend a long time ago, and the other one is from one of my books. So I called this one The Fixer, and you'll see why. When we were getting married, we bought a little house in Derry. We knew we had to do a lot of work in it because all it had was an outside toilet, a kitchen with only a sink, a hot water geyser, a cooker, a wee living room and one bedroom. We had friends who were married around the same time, and they lived in Belfast, and when they came to visit, we would compare what we were doing with the house and what had to be done and the cost and things like that. We were really learning from each other. Their house was a bit newer than ours. That wouldn't have been hard because ours was about 100 years old. Anyway, we had a lot of ideas about the work that needed to be done. But as she said herself, although she may have had big ideas, she had to change her mind because of what had happened the previous week in their house. She was going out to do the grocery shopping, and she left him to put up a toilet roll holder in the bathroom. Apparently he measured up exactly where he would place it, and then he held it steady and he drove a nail in with a hammer. It went right through a water pipe behind, and the water gushed out straight into his eyes, and he was so shocked that he jumped back and the hammer flew out of his hands into the toilet and cracked the toilet bowl. A huge line threaded its way from the top to the bottom as the water started to seep through the crack. He was in a panic. He dropped to his knees and he tried to hold the toilet bowl together by hugging it. But to do that, he had to lift the hammer out, and it had sort of wedged itself into the bottom of the bowl, so he pulled it as hard as he could, and needless to say, the handle was really slippery. He left his hand, and he said to his horror, it seemed to float through the air and land in the sink. He couldn't let go of the toilet to check the damage in the sink. It actually was chipped. He didn't know what to do. The water was still shooting out of the burst pipe, so with a few contortions he was able to take off his shoe and plug the hole in the wall with his big toe, and even though he was cramped and beginning to ache, with his arms around the toilet bowl, his toe stopping the water coming out of the burst pipe, he managed to hold on and stop it. He knew that his wife would sort it out when she came home. What she came back to was pandemonium. She called his name and she got a sort of strangled response. She went into the living room and saw a steady stream of water almost a flow onto the new sofa. And when she looked up at the ceiling, it had a great big bulge in it. And she shouted, "Joe, where are you? The house is flooded." He didn't answer. He couldn't. He was numb and shivering. But when she got to the top of the stairs, she couldn't open the bathroom door because he was wedged against it. She had heard of people having a wee turn in the bathroom, and she was really nervous, so she managed to push it slightly open and peeked her head in. "God almighty, Joe, what happened? Are you okay?" He was lying on the bathroom floor with his arms as tight as he could around the bowl. His leg was perpendicular and his foot was blue against the burst pipe, trying to stop the water from coming through. He didn't realise that it was running behind the hole and gathering in a pool between the joists. When she saw what actually happened, no, she didn't tell us what she said. She ran downstairs just in time to see the ceiling bulge even more. In her panic, she ran next door to her neighbour, a pensioner, and she blurted out, "A plumber, quickly, for God's sake, before the house is wrecked." Seeing her so distressed, that she didn't realise that the neighbour was a bit hard of hearing, and he thought that she said bomber instead of plumber. He phoned the police, and by that stage the bulge in the ceiling had finally burst. The water on the plasterboard had fallen down over the new suite, and the carpet and everywhere was soaked with chalky plaster sticking and everything. The police, when they came, looked around and said, "Mrs, you should have phoned the fire brigade, not us. Where's the bomber?" "What bomber? I didn't phone you. My neighbour phoned a plumber." "Oh, we'll have to have a wee talk with your neighbour. Do you want us to phone a plumber? I think you need it." Somehow she managed to control herself, and when the plumber came, her husband eventually emerged from the bathroom, soaking wet, freezing cold and dishevelled, and he looked at her. She looked at him, and said, "Well," he said, "I think I'll take a bath. Is there any hot water?" She held her hands tightly together to stop herself from strangling him, and she shouted, "Leave the bloody bath alone." They're still married, and that's a long time ago, and I'd be afraid to ask if they were ever able to laugh about it. That's it. I really thank you for the opportunity of remembering that, because it had totally gone out of my mind. My name is Madeline McCulley, and I'm in the Pink Ladies. I'm very grateful to them, and I'm delighted to take part in the Gas Yard Fela event. And this time I'm going to read a story from Derry Folktales. Many of these stories I've gathered from different people, and this particular one was gathered from Ossie Bryson, who was a great raconteur and a lovely man. Well, he's still alive, but he must be well in his 80s. And this one is called The Looking Glass. Now, this story goes way back to the time when the poor tenant farmers had little or nothing, and many of them had never even seen a mirror. And you can ask yourself, why would any of them want a mirror anyway? Well, to get on with the story, there was a man called Dinny who lived with his wife of 50 years in a wee farm out on the far side of Derry. Now, Dinny and Bridget were innocent folk, just wee farmers who worked hard. But there was one day in the year that Bridget was glad to be on her own, and that's the day that Dinny went to the fair in Derry. Now, he didn't go to sell, just to sell the donkey, that was as lazy as sin. No, he went for a bit of crack and chat with other farmers that he never saw from 6 months to the next. Sure, it was all the better if that happened to be in a pub, because that was the one place you could be guaranteed to get away from the woman. Bridget wasn't averse to him going either. Sure, didn't she always press his Sunday suit for him to wear and polish up his boots and put a decent white collar on his shirt with a mother of pearl stud? When the cock crowed on the May morning, Bridget patted him on the back and sent him off, knowing that he would take a good while to walk the length to Derry. You see, Bridget couldn't wait to get him out of the house, for she had a secret vice that she didn't want Dinny to know about. Didn't she like to have a read of a wee romantic book that her sister Ellen had sent her from New York? She knew Dinny would think it a whole load of nonsense if he could see it. But it was more's the pity, because Dinny didn't have a romantic bone in his body. God be good to him. One time she asked him to bring her a bunch of flowers from the fair, because that's what the hero in the book did. And what did Dinny say? "What good is flowers? Sure, you can't eat them." And that was that. So poor Bridget had to content herself with the only romance that she was ever going to get was going to be from a book. As soon as Dinny turned the bend in the road and the wee donkey trotting beside him, Bridget pulled the book out from under the mattress, cut a big slice of soda bread, made a cup of tea for herself, and she was ready to sit down and read it. So she'd been waiting for 6 months to get on with the story. She wasn't a fast reader, mind you, for she only got the chance when Dinny left for the fair day. But sure, Dinny didn't know the pleasure of it, for he couldn't read at all. At school he never could pass the first reader, and that was because his dad wanted him on the farm. Anyway, she put a cushion on top of the turf basket, stretched out her legs, and oh boy, she was as happy as the day was long. Dinny wouldn't be home for another 6 hours or so, maybe more if he was drunk, and she might even manage to finish the story. Dinny marched brightly along the road and swung his blackthorn stick around. Sure, it was great to be out in the fresh air on the first day of May. Just to be on the safe side of the berries, he called out, "White rabbit, white rabbit, white rabbit," 3 times for luck, in the firm belief that nothing would ail him all that day. Man, sir, when he reached Derry, it was buzzing like a hive of bees. He heard a voice calling and looked around, and there was Paddy McLaughlin, a fellow he used to see on these occasions. "Oh, Dinny, it's good to see you. Are you having one?" he said, nodding in the direction of the pub. "I am so," said Dinny, and they walked together down Shipke Street with the donkeys trotting beside them. "If you're going to sell that wee donkey, I've a mind to buy it," says Paddy. "6 bob and it's yours," says Dinny. "5, says Paddy. "Right you are," says Dinny. The 2 men spit in their hands and shook to seal the bargain. Now, didn't Dinny spend most of the money on the drink, and by 6 o'clock he was staggering out of the pub with only a weena halfpence in his pocket. On the way out of the town he saw a man selling all sorts of fripperies on a stall, and he wove his way over. He was thinking that Bridget might be vexed that he had spent so much money, and if he bought her a wee something, he could say it cost more. Satisfied with his logic, he rummaged around and he picked up a wee brooch. "How much?" he asks the pedlar. "Threepence," says the pedlar, eyeing Dinny as a soft touch. Dinny left it down as if he was scalded, and he picked up a wee looking glass, holding it up close. "Oh my God," says he to the man, "where did you get that?" And the man says to him, "Why, do you want to buy it?" "Of course I do," says Dinny. "Sure, that's a picture of my father. How much do you want for it?" 1.6, says the pedlar. Dinny shook his head. Bridget's present was going to have to go by the by, for he hadn't enough money left. God curse that drink for using it up. The pedlar measured him up again. "Better a sale than none at this time of day." "I'll give it to you for two for 1.6, he said, and Dinny slapped his thigh. "Done," says he, and he took the 2 things, put Bridget's brooch in his pocket. Well, as he walked along the road, he stopped every now and then, and he took the mirror out of his pocket, and sure nearly had tears in his eyes. "Ah, well," says he, "wasn't my father the fine-looking man?" Now then, when he got home, he hung his coat on the nail at the back of the door, but Bridget, seeing his flushed face and the way he nearly tripped over the step coming in, scolded him. "It's the only suit you have. Here, I'll hang it up for you." "No, don't bother," says he, "for I have a wee present for you." And he put his hand in his pocket and he brought out the brooch. He never took out the looking glass, for Bridget and his dad had never got on well. His dad always thought her too uppity, and sure she wouldn't want to know what he spent the money on, a picture of his father. "You bought me a present," says Bridget in shock. Dinny had never bought her one before. He handed the brooch and she nearly threw her arms around him, she was that pleased. Dinny saw the light in her eyes and stepped back, afeard of what she might do. Sure, she pinned the brooch on her apron and smiled, and then hung the kettle on the crook over the fire. Well, she forgot about her vexation until she saw Dinny go into his pocket at every opportunity, taking something out and smiling to himself. She waited till he went to bed, for after a day's drinking he was always tired. She shut the bedroom door and went to his coat and took the looking glass out of his pocket. "Oh, Holy Mary, what's my Dinny doing carrying a picture of a woman around in his pocket? And I wouldn't mind, but she's the dearest looking woman I ever saw in my life." She shoved the mirror back in his coat pocket and he went to bed. Sure, she tossed and turned that night, thinking 'twas no wonder Dinny had bought her a brooch, for it was a guilty conscience he had. The next day, when he started gleeking in his pocket at all sorts of time that morning, she couldn't stick it for 1 minute. "Come here, you," she said. "What are you doing around with a picture of a woman in your pocket?" "What are you talking about, Bridget? Sure, that's a picture of me dad." "Well," says she, "I never saw your dad with straggly hair nor teeth missing, like I saw in that old dame last night. You're a crafty wee skitter. I knew you'd something to hide when you brought me home a brooch, for never in your life did you ever buy me anything." "What are you talking about, Bridget? I bought that and that wee picture from me dad from the pedlar in Derry." "That's no picture of your dad, that's a picture of a woman." "Don't be daft, Bridget. Sure, that's me dad, and he's a fine-looking man, so he is. I'm telling you now, Dinny McCool, you'll hear more about this, for I'm not satisfied." Well, the next day he was out in the hill with the sheep, and Bridget got on her bicycle and went to the parochial house, for she wanted the priest to have a word with Dinny. When he opened the door, she started bawling, even before she had a word out. "Come in, woman dear, what's the matter?" says the priest, ushering her in. "Oh, Father, my heart's breaking, so it is. That blackguard of a man is going around with a picture of a woman in his pocket, and if she was a good-looking woman, it wouldn't be so bad, but she's the worst-looking woman I ever set eyes on." Said the priest, "Now settle yourself, Bridget. There must be some explanation." "Explanation, my eye," answered Bridget. "Sure, I saw her picture myself, and there she was staring out of that picture as bold as brass and just as ugly. Now, Bridget, listen to me, and this is what you'll do. You'll go home and keep your own counsel, say nothing to Dinny, but I'll go over tonight and sort things out. Don't fret yourself till I see Dinny. There's a good woman." And he patted her on the back and walked her to the door. Once he shut the door, he sighed, thinking that the life of a parish priest was not an easy one. That night Bridget sat at the table and not a sound came out of her. Dinny kept looking, for that wasn't Bridget's form at all. "Is there something ailing you, Bridget?" he asked, but Bridget just cleared away the dinner dishes and sat down with her knitting at the fire. There came a knock on the door and Dinny opened it. "Well, come on in, Father, sure it's grand to see you. Bridget, it's the priest come to visit." Bridget rose. "What brings you this way tonight, Father? Sure, I haven't seen you for a long while," she says, all innocent-like. "Ach, I was just passing this way and saw the light," says the priest, thinking to himself that women are crafty, two-faced creatures. I'm going to shut the byre, Father, says Dunny, but make yourself comfortable. And Dunny reached for his coat. Hold on a wee minute, Dunny, for I want to have a few words with you. Sure, do you want a wee job in a parochial house or something? No, answered the priest, it's a bit more serious, Dunny, and what I want is a straight answer from you. Are you carrying a picture of a woman around in your pocket? Ach, Father, now I know what you're here for. That story came from Bridget, and there's no truth in it, Father, for I can tell you now that that's a picture of my own father I have in my pocket, and a fine-looking man he was and all. Bridget looked askance at Dunny, then turned to the priest. Father, don't you be listening to him, for it's a picture of a woman he has in his pocket, and a rough-looking hussy she is. Hush, Bridget, says the priest, holding up his hand. We'll settle this once and for all. Dunny, give me that picture out of your pocket right now. Right you are, Father, and he plucked the mirror from his pocket. There you are, and he handed it to the parish priest. Then the priest looked at it, and he began to laugh. Well, he says, aren't you the two right agents? Sure, isn't that the parish priest who was here before me? And that's it. This story is from a book I wrote of folk tales from Derry, and this one is one that I think could be one for these times in Ireland where differences are being challenged and solved. And I call this "What You Want Is Not What You Need," because so often we want things, and when we get them, they're not really what we need at all. And this one goes back, actually, I'll skip out the historical part of it, but you know, there's a great tendency in farmers in Ireland to hold on to what they have. What we have, we hold. And this story, with that sort of history rattling in the background, it's easy to see that the old blood about possessions can be stirred up, and nobody will ever give an inch. And even the best of friends and families can fall out over the head of a wee thing like a lamb. Ned lived out in the countryside, halfway up a hill on a wee farm. He scratched a living from the poor land, enough to feed his wife and wains. Mary, his wife, was long gone to her rest, and his family were scattered all over the world, since there wasn't much future for them at home. Ned was contented enough, for he had a cow and a wee flock of sheep. His best friend James was also his closest neighbour. They'd grown old together and shared many a joy and sorrow, and sure, being on their own, all they had left with each other, even though they kicked with different feet, as it were. But this story was about a silly argument over a stray lamb that neither one of them even needed. Now the lamb was in James's land, and he claimed it, but Ned was adamant that it was his. For wasn't the lamb crying to get back to his mother, and the ewe was equally distressed. It's mine, shouted Ned. Well, I say it belongs to me, shouted James back, and so it went on until they both said things that they would regret, for a bad temper knows no restraint on the tongue. They were very stubborn men, and neither would give in, but being old, they didn't get to blows. Oh no, they just stopped shouting at each other, stomped off to their own houses, and slammed the doors shut. A month passed, and not a word was said between them. Old Ned was feeling lonely, but still angry, for he was of a mind that James was in the wrong. One morning he heard a knock, sort of gentle-like, on his door. He was surprised, for very few people came to call on him. When he opened the door, there was a young man standing on the flagstone outside, and he introduced himself as a carpenter who travelled around the country, doing jobs here and there. Ned could see that he looked fairly respectable, and he had a wooden toolbox at his feet. He had a kind smile and two twinkling eyes, and Ned felt immediately at ease with him. I'm looking for work, said the young man, and if you have any jobs that need doing, I would be very happy to help you out. Well, Ned rubbed his hand over his chin and he answered, well, as a matter of fact, I have a job that you could do. Do you see that house across the hill there? That's my neighbour's house. And do you see that wee stream running along there? Well, that's our property line, and that stream wasn't there last week. He just did that to spite me. I watched him digging that ditch along there, and he diverted the stream from the upper pool, and he flooded it right down the property line. So now we don't only have a ditch to separate us, we have a stream of water. The young man gazed at the stream, then at Ned's face, and he could read the frustration there. "I understand," said he. "What do you want me to do?" "Well, I'm so mad at him. I've got wood and all that you need over there in my barn, enough to build a fence. I want you to build a tall fence all along that burn, and then I won't even have to see his house again, for he has my heart scalded. That'll teach him." The carpenter smiled and he lifted his toolbox. "I'll do a very good job for you, Ned." "Righty-ho," said Ned. "I have to go into the town to get some stuff, so you'll be on your own. Just make yourself something to eat when you want. The door's open." And with that he set off on his donkey and Craic to Derry. The carpenter carried the wood he needed to the stream, and then he started to work. He worked all day without a break, not even for lunch, measuring, sawing and nailing the wood into place. With the setting of the sun, he gathered his tools, cleaned them and put them away, well satisfied with his work. Just then old Ned returned, and when he saw the job that the carpenter had done, he couldn't speak, for it wasn't the high fence that he had asked for, but a beautiful footbridge with carved handrails reaching from Ned's side of the stream to James's. Old James came walking across the field and crossed the bridge with his hand stuck out. Ned took it and held on. "I'm sorry about our misunderstanding, Ned. That lamb is yours. I don't know what got into me. I just want us to go on being good friends, for it's lonely up here with you and me not speaking. So when I saw that bridge, I said to myself, that's just the wee push that I needed to come over here. No, you keep the lamb, James. I just want us to be friends too, but that bridge was this young fella's idea." Ned turned and the carpenter was hoisting the toolbox onto his shoulder, ready to leave. "Hold on," says Ned. "What do I owe you?" "You've already paid me," said the young man, looking at the clasped hands. "Well, young fella," said James, "me and Ned here could keep you busy for weeks, what with the wee jobs we have around the farms." The carpenter smiled and said, "I'd like to stay, James, but I can't. I have many more bridges to build." And with that he walked down the road whistling, on to his next bridge building. And that story was one that was brought to America by emigrants, and I heard it once when I was young, and then once when I was in America gathering stories, I heard something of the same story told, and it's so often said, you know, what Ned really wanted was the last thing that he needed. So that's why I like that story.
Myra Canning here. I'm reading a poem on behalf of the Pink Ladies for the Gashard Fela. The poem is called "Ach Maggie, What About Ye?" "Ach Maggie, what about ye? Ach Susie, sure I'm grand. I've got a rake of aches and pains. The doctor says that 15 wains has took its toll and wrecked me, and ruined me figure too. It's caused the boobs to hang down low. Now tell me, how are you? I forgot to tell you now I's mind. Ach Susie, here no smiles. The doctor says in all his years he's never seen such piles. He says they hang in bunches. It's no wonder that they're sore. But enough of me. Now how are you? I don't want to be a bore. And then there's me arthritis in me knee and shoulder too, and he's had to give me Senecock to help me in the loo. He's well vexed about me eyesight, and me hearing's not that good. But sure life goes on as well, you know, and here I'm being rude. I'm doing all the talking. I haven't let you speak. I have to see a specialist sometime within the week. He's checking out me gallbladder, me spleen, me heart, me chest, and then I'm seeing someone else, and he'll check all the rest. I have to take a Valium to calm me inner strife, but all in all I must say, I'm happy with me life. Och Susie, it was really great to chew the cud with you, but there's me bus I have to run. I'm glad you're healthy too. This is a poem called WWW. I'm an internet explorer, a surfer of the net, and you'd really be surprised at all the agents I have met. I've been in every chat room, I've opened every door, and I'm here to tell you honestly, go there, you might score. There's a fella hot and horny and a flat and gobna scale. He asked if I'd be willing to come and stroke his whale. He's told me it's a whopper and he keeps it in the sink. Do you think he might be lying? Well, what's a girl to think? Then there's 6'2" in Craic in the heights where men are tall, for I know for years of looking that most dairy men are small. I rather fancy taller just to see how good it feels, looking skywards when I'm snogging and the chance to wear my heels. Then there's Sexy from Chantallo, though he sounds a proper creep. I don't go there very often, he makes me want to sleep. He talks about his staying car, he wants me in his bed. He says that he's fantastic, so I'll pass his name to Jed. There's a farmer from Dungiven, pictured naked, wearing wellies. He lives alone, or so he says, and likes to eat red jellies. He says he's lonely evenings, and that if I come to stay, he'll let me wear his wellies, and he'll wear a dress that day. Then there's Derek from the Culmore. He lives there with his mother. He's fastidious, fussy, furtive. I don't know if I'd bother. He wants to make me breakfast and invite his friend to see me dressed up as a French maid sipping Earl Grey tea. I've toured the Brandywell, the Bogside, Bishop Street and down the line. I've met every shape and size there, ridiculous and sublime. The fat, the thin, the baldies, the young, the old, the lot. I could give you names and numbers of a few that sounded hot. But the other night while surfing, I think I met my match. The penthouse suite down Queen's Quay. Flip me, what a catch. He said his name is Richard Head, but I can call him Dick. His bedroom overlooks the foil. His bed moves with a flick of the remote control that operates the gadgets in his flat. And in a flash I knew that I'd be hanging up my hat. I'm signing off the internet, for down the quay I'll be. My surfing days are over. Signed Sexy Sue, that's me. And that's it. You got it first.